Energy without strategy is just chaos. I wish I could take credit for that. It comes from Sun Tzu, and it's a 1,000-year-old text. But it's never been more appropriate than it is today, particularly as it relates to IT strategy, all the disruption out there, all the talk around AI. This is an episode where we're recapping the best moments from 2024. Our producer, Gene, is going to kind of turn the tide, hit me, best moments, best advice, practical, simple, actionable insights from IT leaders, innovators, your peers in about 30 minutes. So hang with us here on the Bridgecast. And of course, if you like it, don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you get your favorite podcast content. See you on the inside.
Tech has reshaped our reality, redefining how we live, work, and connect. And driving this revolution, real people with bold ideas. Welcome to the Bridgecast, where host Scott Kinka has in-depth discussions with the brightest minds in tech. Together, they tackle the future of work, innovation, entrepreneurship, and navigating the new realities of AI and hybrid work. These conversations will give you the insights and strategies to stay ahead, both in business and life. The Bridgecast is a service of Bridgepointe Technologies. As the nation's leading tech advisory and consulting firm, Bridgepointe is disrupting the way businesses make and manage their technology and customer experience investments. We invite you to experience the better way, the Bridgepointe way. Now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
What's up, Bridgecast Nation? Today, we're switching it up a little bit. If you've been following us for the last couple of years, I don't know if you can believe this or not, but it's going to be 3 years of doing this podcast. You believe that?
Wow.
It's crazy, right? If time flies when you're having a tiny bit of fun.
Our third annual, kind of like 2 years and a quarter.
Yeah, July. I think we taped our first episode July of 22.
What episode are we up to?
This is going to probably be 70.
Okay.
No, 69.
Wow.
I'm not going to tell you.
That one alone. Yeah,
just we'll let that go. Yeah. But listen, we're going to do something different today. Finally, every year, I think you wait for this, Scott is on the hot seat. So the Bridgecast with Scott Kinka stars Scott. We bring in a whole bunch of people throughout the year, friends, business partners, authors. We had them last year. We had everything last year. Today, this one's going to be chock full of stuff. You're not going to want to miss it. I have some surprises for him. I have some surprises for you. We're going to recap 2024. We're going to talk about Tech Summit. We're going to get into AI. We're going to talk about AI. I don't know if we're going to scare them or not. Like, is AI going to be taking your job? Like, we're going to talk about that, right?
Okay.
So why don't we get started?
Okay.
I thought you said you were going to open the wine while I did the intro.
Well, I mean, we can do it now.
You want to do it now?
I mean, we did wine last year.
All right, so you do that.
So we're just going to do it.
Okay, let's go. So talk to me about this one.
Poggio Amarelli.
I like it.
You know this one.
I do, actually. Yeah. It was a little bit of a setup, I think.
It was a little bit of a setup.
Little bit, that's okay.
Why do you know this one?
Oh, should I get into it?
Do it. Just real quick.
Real quick. We went to Italy in 2023.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine said, if you were to go to Italy, hire these guys as your travel guides. And by good friends, I mean this guy here. We did it. I took his advice. They took us to this winery called Poggio Amarelli, which I got back with some wine, showed it to him. He said, we were there too. So we've both been there. And then every year, right around this time, matter of fact, if I'm being honest, tomorrow night's the night.
Tomorrow night, yeah.
They fly in and do a USA World Tour from Tuscany with a bunch of bottles of wine. They ship it to my house, and we have a big event and a big dinner. 40 people, I think, will be there tomorrow night. There'll be more of this served, I promise you, tomorrow night. So this is what we're going to do today. I appreciate this greatly. So while we're doing that, let's celebrate a little bit. 25 episodes in 2024, thousands of downloads. We had a super successful Tech Summit 2024 in Palm Springs with over 450 of our closest friends, right? That aside, are there any moments that you would take out, some highlights from 2024, whether it be around the podcast, around the Tech Summit, business, life, whatever? Like, talk to me about some highlights.
I think we're going to get into a lot of them.
We will.
Right. Well, I mean, you mentioned Tech Summit, which is amazing. Before we do there, let's do this. Thank you for another great year on the pod.
Absolutely.
And hopefully you're all celebrating with us. So let's sip this guy.
And thank you. Oh, man.
Just like I remember it.
What year was that you opened up?
It was 19.
That's 2019? And that was the Chianti Classico?
This is the Chianti Classico.
Listen, he's not being cheap today. That's
Yeah.
that's a good wine. That's a good bottle of wine. That's a good bottle. I'm just being honest. That's not cheap.
I mean, look, there were just so many special moments. We had unbelievable guests this year.
Yeah.
I do, of course, the summit's always a highlight. Not only what everybody in podcast land got to see on our AI episode, but that entire event was just over the top. Mm-hmm. The keynote there, the speakers that we had there, the friends that we had on the show. I don't want to steal thunder from kind of your hits throughout the episode, so I'm going to leave that go. But obviously, our guests this year were amazing.
Yep.
We had a fantastic time with some of our own this year, which was great.
Yep.
We wasn't just external guests, we had some Bridgepointers on there as well. So I think it was amazing. And look, at the end of the day, it was a banner year for us at Bridgepointe. I think it was a banner year in the industry. I think the idea that let someone else take care of the plumbing while you figure out how to build the house is really resonating with C-level executives in IT, and it's been, as a result, just a boon for alternative models of IT procurement like we deliver. But in terms of the moments, maybe we'll just kind of leave it for someone. I'm curious to see what you picked out.
Oh,
I'm not gonna spill the popcorn.
Okay.
All right.
But I do want to go back to something that you just said real quick. Give me that little plumber thing again.
Well, I think, look, at the end of the day, we talk about this a lot. If you're an IT director, a CIO, you're in various phases, even of your IT career. I think what's interesting about the last couple of years is that the job has changed. You've heard me say this on the podcast a million times. The job has changed so intrinsically post-COVID. I think, and I said this on stage at Summit during the lead up, that it hasn't changed over the last couple of years. And what I mean by that is, that IT was a cost center pre-pandemic. The CIO reported to the COO or under the CFO, considered a cost center, and then the COVID happened and the CEO was like, what do I do?
Yeah. And
now the technology is coming at us. We've got hybrid work. That was a big topic for us a couple of years ago. We sort of shifted into way more around AI and collaboration strategies and formalizing all of that. And these are not like cost center kind of conversations. These are, how do we grow the business? How do we attract employees? So, I think a lot of IT was really in the plumbing business previously, and now they've got to be kind of in the design business, the house design business. They're working with the GC upstairs, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, to have organizations that, like Bridgepointe, that enable customers to focus on the plumbing, if you will, the process of procuring, buying, managing, implementing technology while they're thinking about the plan strategically, I think is what I'm really referring to there.
No, a great points, and the reason why I made you bring that back up again is, first of all, I got to go back now while we take a break, and I'm going to look up the word intrinsically because I don't know what the hell that means. But I digress. Well, the reason why I brought that up is because as I went through this, there's a lot of little quips that you bring up. Like when we talk, you have those little, like, you want to work on the plumbing and the stuff. And I think we're probably going to need to make some mugs called Kinka-isms. Should we do Kinka-isms on mugs? If you want that, make sure you hit one of us up via email or whatever. We'll send you a mug. I'm not going to lie. Unless there's 8 million people that ask for a mug. I don't know if we have
that
budget.
Or at least if everybody picks a different Kinkism, we got a problem.
We call it
a Kinkism?
Kinka-ism. Right?
Oh boy.
Listen, we're starting something new here. It's okay. It's okay. It's going to be good. All right, so here's what we're going to do.
Yep.
We're going to get into some apps. We're going to do some fun stuff. I want to talk about some of the apps because at the end of every episode, you always ask our guests some personal questions like, what's your one app? What's your book? What's on your end table? What's one of the biggest mistakes you've made as an IT leader, right? We're going to get into all that stuff. At the end of it, I'm going to drop that on your lap. You're going to answer for 2025. We're going to see what some of those things are. We're going to get into predictions. But first, let's talk about some apps. Were there any apps in here that really caught your attention? So I would say we were heavy. So in the 25 episodes we've done, you've asked this question 25 times.
Okay.
We were super heavy on the podcast and music apps, which I think, if I remember, 2024 was your app, and we'll revisit that at the end of 2023. Yep. That was your app of the year.
Okay, so we asked every one of our guests if there was a dystopian future.
Yep.
And they had one application working on their phone. I mean, I always love the people that say flashlight because that's such an informative answer.
Yep.
Right. It's obvious for those who mention their own app, right? If they have Patrick Kelly, God bless him, was like, I'll have Zoom.
How about Saad? Saad called out the signal.
He wanted the signal. and of course you have the Apple Music and the podcast stuff, which, I always look at it like if there's some dystopian future, there's probably not a whole hell of a lot of news going on.
Yep.
I did enjoy, a couple of people said TikTok, and they said that because they were like, for as long as I live, I'll never run out of content.
Yep.
So it's probably the one thing to just, get you out of hunter gathering,
Yeah.
That's where you land on a day-to-day basis. So that one popped in a little bit, Jack Jackson, I think whose book's about to come out, said DoorDash, which of course, he commented about needing to eat in a survival situation.
Yep.
I'm not sure that you're actually able to get DoorDash to you, so you need to think about that.
Well, same thing.
Brian Thomas said Instacart.
You always talk about with the ESPN apps. Is there going to be any sports? Like you're going to be looking at old games.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to have to figure that out.
I knew it happened. So at least on TikTok, it would be new content.
So here's what I think we should do, actually. Between the apps and the books, I think maybe the listeners, and this is just me going out on a limb here, might like a list of C-suite executives, what they're reading and what they're using on their phone. And I think maybe we put that out.
Let's do it.
Right? We could do that, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump in. All right, so one of the things that you asked these guys and gals was business mistakes. And business mistakes as an IT leader. And I want to say this real quick. If you're watching on video, I have a thing in front of me because there's a lot of quotes and I don't want to misquote anybody, right? So I'm going to be doing a lot of reading. So business mistakes. Chris Cochran of ProsperOps said, being overly conservative in the early stages of a business. Yep. So the question for you is, if you were leading a technology overhaul at your company and money was no object, where would you be aggressive with that money?
I mean, it probably sounds obvious to say AI.
Okay.
But I think it's a perfect answer given what we just said about sort of this, hey, we were, IT was plumbers, cost center, sort of essential communication center. Now, IT departments are focused largely on efficiency and growing the business going forward. Right. So I think the place to be aggressive from an expenditure perspective, not risky, but aggressive from an expenditure perspective would probably be in AI.
In AI.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. And I think we'll get deeper into that and more niche, if you will, as we get further along in this episode. So I might pigeonhole you into a specific type of AI, right? Because it depends on what you're using and what you have.
Yeah,
right?
Look, we could be on this topic for the remainder of the meeting.
Yeah.
Is it a greenfield company? Are you, reinvesting in something that already exists?
Right.
And I think the answer would differ, but at the end of the day, the opportunity to drive margin into the business from the IT suite sits in AI. I don't want to go too deep because I know you have a bunch of other.
Yeah, because we're going to really hit on what you just said there, and I know you're going to rip that apart, which will be good. All right, so this one's from one of our own, Melanie Thomas, VP of Cybersecurity at Bridgepointe, right?
Love her.
Completely losing track of an important deliverable for a board of directors meeting. So what I would ask you is, you got to dig back here. Have you ever lost track or ignored an important deliverable for a board or a customer meeting that you can remember, and what was that?
You mean besides forgetting to use the restroom before the meeting?
Okay, that's one.
That's a big one.
That's a big one?
Sorry, I got to get up.
Doesn't? Oh, so wait, you having to pee doesn't make you move faster?
Always use the restroom.
Always use. All right, I'm gonna.
This is interesting advice though. I'm sure I can think of 50 instances of if I only had a slide on this or what about this? But I think that usually they center around one primary topic. And that's not anticipating the next question, right? So, and look, you don't necessarily have to have content for the next question. You could be creating content for days.
Yeah.
But I do think that as you're preparing for a meeting, particularly one where there's content to be presented, like a board meeting or a big meeting that you have in a customer's boardroom or something along those lines, is anticipating objections. Like be the customer when you review your content. You don't need to stick it in your narrative, but it's super cool when you get asked a question. You're like, you know what? I thought you might ask that, so it's back in the appendix. Hang on, just give me a second. Bang, right?
Yeah.
So and as effective as that is, the converse is really bad. Like, oh, that's a good question. Let me get back to you. Obviously, that's a fine answer.
Yeah.
But try to anticipate the next question. I think, and really the idea there is review your content in a way where you're acting like the customer and you're thinking about what the next question would be.
Okay.
Have 6 or 8 of them ready.
So when we talk about the marketing perspective, like in my day-to-day business, I always talk about find out what your client's looking for before you put together a service proposal, let's say, right?
Yeah.
So, we're watching Suits now, right? And he always says, as an attorney, don't ever ask a question you don't know what the answer is going to be. You're working that in reverse almost. Make sure you have the answers to the questions that they're going to ask.
Yeah,
right?
But I will say it's an interesting question, and I love that because, and my wife just watched the entire 7 years of Suits in
so good.
in 3 months. I had never seen it, but I used to say all the time, and this is going back, it's like 99, I'm a 20-something-year-old kid working for a carrier in their internet division. Nobody knew what that was, but I got hired to do it because, I was like the most senior person who understood what the internet was.
Right. Yeah, right.
So, but, we were working with traditional, like, telco salespeople in our business, and I always say, don't be afraid, and I still say this to this day to our partners even, our strategists, don't be afraid to ask the question that you don't know the answer to. Because in tech, you couldn't possibly know all the answers.
Yeah.
Right? But I think the value in having partners, consultants, advisors, et cetera, is that they've got access to get the answers.
Yep.
So that you don't have to seek them. So if you're the consultant, get loose.
Yeah.
Ask the question you don't know the answer to.
Yep.
That's okay. And the answer back, listen, it's a really great question. I don't really know, but I'll respond later today with a little bit of an answer on that.
I think that's the technology equivalent of I got a guy.
I got a guy.
I got a guy, right? Yeah. I don't know the answer to that right now, but I got a guy. I'll get that for you in a minute, right?
Totally.
That's brilliant. I love it. All right, so this next one is from Mark Haupt of DataBank. Underestimating apathy and ignorance towards cybersecurity. So, as a consultant, because we just talked about that, to large tech companies, what would be your first step of advice for making sure they do not underestimate internal apathy or ignorance towards their security issues?
Yeah, I think it would be hard for me to answer this question without mentioning compliance.
Okay.
Right, which is businesses that have compliance needs can't be apathetic, right? But they still struggle with the end user being apathetic, right? The apathy component is really around the end user, which, as I think anybody who's followed any of our security-focused episodes, will tell you, every single one of our guests who's had this conversation has said the biggest attack vector in any company are the humans in it.
Yeah.
Right. So the biggest area around apathy is you're gonna figure the perimeter security out. Yes, you're gonna have all the devices in place to be able to answer the questions on the compliance or regulatory questionnaire. Fine. The real issue is making sure that your largest attack vector takes it seriously, and that absolutely requires executive endorsement.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest way to manage that, and the way to make sure that the executives understand it is, unfortunately, one of the blind spots that most IT leaders have, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, making an ROI case for expenditures.
Yeah.
Right? Like being able to have the financial conversation in terms, not in cost terms.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I bought this thing that's going to cost. But more in terms of cost avoidance or, margin generation or those types of things. It's really hard for a lot of IT people.
Sure.
Right? So I think, making sure that the rest of the C-suite understands the risk. And then I think for IT leaders, if you're not somebody who's able to make a financial case, lean on a partner to do it. Many times, we say it all the time. Melanie, God bless her, says it all the time. She's like, the first time that a company gets serious about their security expenditures, and in particular end user training, is the first time they get attacked.
Yep. Yeah.
But unfortunately, the damage is done.
Yep.
Right? So I think situationalizing that to the executive team and getting their endorsement is really the key to that.
So it's unfortunately, it becomes easier to put an ROI after the attack.
Sure. What did it cost us?
Right. And usually
that's a hard way of looking at it.
It is. Which is, but for me, from that perspective, if I was in that space, it's one of those things like insurance. Like, I know I need it, I'll get it down the road. Like, this hasn't happened to us yet, I'm going to roll the dice. Mm-hmm. So when you come in as a consultant and you sit in front of me and you go, you need security, and I go, yeah, I know, but we're just not doing it today.
Yeah.
Right? Because you haven't felt that pain yet, right?
Sure.
So that's a good piece of advice there. That's boardroom advice.
And the only qualifier I'll give you there is everybody's doing security. The question is, are they doing, they're doing the physical security, the edge security, the network security. It's the rest of the package, focusing on end user training, having compliance and regulatory policies in place that are trained, tested, et cetera, is really where people fall.
So stop bitching about your VPN connection on your laptop, right? All right, there's a reason for it. All right, so real quick, we're going to shift gears here. We're going to do books. So I'm going to point out my book, and I know you and I had a quick conversation about two that maybe we want to get into.
Okay, shoot.
I think the one that I grabbed my attention is not going to be a surprise to anybody, but Umesh Lakshman from Lumen said, The Field Guide to Whiskey.
Wait, by the way, if you go back and watch the episode with Umesh, he's awesome, first off.
Yep.
And second of all, once you hang out with him for a little bit, you're like, That makes perfect sense because this is a dude I actually would enjoy drinking whiskey.
100%.
He's like the world's most interesting guy.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
No, that was a great episode. Yep. That was a great episode.
Great episode.
All right, so two that you caught your attention was Ray Kasai from TalkDesk talked about Crossing the Chasm or Chasm by Jeffrey Moore.
Yeah. I mean, Jeffrey Moore is arguably one of our greatest futurists. And if you can catch any of his books, it's amazing. Crossing the Chasm is really about the cycle of a technology adoption.
Okay.
And I mean, gosh, I don't know exactly when it was written. It's probably 25 years old at this point.
Okay.
I would venture to guess. But you can, if you've never read anything from Jeffrey Moore, haven't read Crossing the Chasm, and as a reformed CTO, right? Innovator, coder, like that book is just an amazing way of thinking about how technology gets adopted. And it becomes part of the lexicon in certain schools of thought and in technology development. But what's interesting about it is if you read it now and you've never read it before, it's like it's being written about AI.
Oh.
Like it's wild, the whole adoption curve, Moore's law, all that, it's just spectacular.
1984-esque?
No, it's really more about how it's less about what's coming and more about the way we overhype a technology at the beginning, don't understand it, rush into it, how it gets adopted, becomes mainstream. It's just the way, and you can apply it against the internet, and you can apply it against music on your phone, you can apply it against name it and drag it all the way forward into AI. It's an amazing tome, if you will.
Love it. Love it. And then the other one is from our friend Mike Nowak at BCM1, which was The Art of War by Sun Tzu.
I keep on my end table.
I have one there too. Yeah.
Look, I think, and maybe I'll reserve a little bit of this, but I think what's interesting about that book, first off, is that you don't have to read it. You can just open to a page and read one thing and be like, okay, here's a thing for today. So I just open to a page every once in a while on it. But again, it's almost like the ancient version of Crossing the Chasm. Like you can read it today, and it's still applicable. And I think in particular, and we're going to beat AI to death, I'm sure, in this episode, but one of the principal tenets in there, and I think Mike actually called it out in there, and it was energy without strategy is chaos.
Yep.
Right. So, and I think there's a lot to be said for that statement when you think about, customers are generally either all in and making mistakes or not in and making mistakes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is one of those scenarios where we're constantly saying to customers, either slow down or speed up. Right? But they're rarely in the middle and with a good equilibrium, on AI, and we'll get into it on some of these future questions, but and maybe we'll refer back to it throughout the rest of this episode. But that to me couldn't be more appropriate. And when was that written? How many hundreds of years ago?
Yeah,
right?
I couldn't even tell you.
An amazing book.
Good stuff. That's one of the ones of all these. Most of these are all new to me. So I'm looking at them going, So I'm looking for you to give me advice. Sun Tzu is one that I've read. I've had that a couple times.
Perfect.
All right. So now we're going to get into AI a little bit deeper. We're going to talk a little bit about Tech Summit, right? So at Tech Summit, we had a panel. We did a live version of the podcast. We did a part 1 and part 2. And if you haven't checked that out, make sure you get onto the Bridgepointe Technologies, bridgepointetechnologies.com/blog. Right, and search for the podcast. They were great episodes. Nick Slater from Dialpad pointed that companies needed to ensure their data is clean and accurate before they start deploying AI solutions. Otherwise, the AI outcomes will be flawed. Also, which is not really part of this one, but in our first episode that we dropped of 2025 with Dwayne Barnes of RapidScale, you discussed with him being ready for AI. Whether it be cleaning your data or tying AI. See, I can't read sometimes. That's not great.
Yeah.
Tying your AI to attainable ROIs and goals. Discuss some ideas companies can use to start to see if they're even close to ready to have the AI conversation internally.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge that we're having right now is, and this happens anytime I think a new technology comes out, is that the immediate inclination is that new tech can solve old problems. And just think about that for a minute, right? Okay. So any AI, any large language model in particular, is informed based on data. And we had this problem even years ago in our CX business. Customers say, we're going to deploy bots and it's going to take out agents, because we're not training them fast enough. And we're like, all right, well, where's the training material for the bot? Well, we don't have any. Okay, well, listen, good tech isn't going to make up for bad process. If you don't have it written down, And I've had customers go, well, listen, we'll just inform the AI on the transcripts of our call recordings. Well, how do you know your agents did everything right? Like and I'm using that as obviously an extreme example, but that's what both of them were referring to, is that there's a data cleansing project, and a bit probably of like, a moment of self-reflection, right?
Yep.
In any company, where you're, we're going to do a private large language model. Okay, well, hold on for a minute, right? What do you have to inform it with? And that's one of those things to just think about as you go. And that's really what they're intimating there, is that, companies with data challenges, or let's say lack of documentation in some cases, are not going to solve that with AI. You've got to kind of get together, what's the ideal call, policy, process, whatever look like, make sure that it's documented, inform off of that. Or, you go the opposite, which is you inform with everything you have, you test the hell out of it, right?
Yeah.
And you watch the results. And maybe that is a way
Yep.
to get some documentation, but you've got to be thoughtful about it. The just turn it on methodology, like that, I'll give you an example. Copilot is arguably the most powerful and probably the most dangerous way for you to step directly into AI.
Okay.
Right? Because think about it, it's every email, every document, like it's your Office 365 scenario. It's being informed as you go. You start asking Copilot, hey, how do we do X? Well, where's the answer coming from?
Yeah, your docs.
Right?
Yep.
That are probably chock full of a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
It's not accurate. Right?
Right.
So, and listen, great technology, that's not the point. This is an application conversation we're having.
Okay, I love that. This is going to get fun, I think.
Yeah.
So, along those lines, right, in the AI space, there were some consistent items that came up, and I broke these things out. There's some comments that we got revolving around them, and I have questions that back them up as well, right? So the three topics that kept jumping out were AI governance and regulation, AI budget, and then human and machine collaboration, which is when you're going to tell the audience that their job is safe. Or not. I don't know yet. I don't know. We're going to find out.
We'll see.
We're going to find out. So at the Tech Summit,
Yeah.
Christy Thomas of Vonage said, governance isn't a buzzword. It's the only thing standing between your company and an AI-driven PR disaster. The first question is, let's talk governance and regulation. Any PR disaster examples that come to mind for companies to potentially look out for? Because I'm going to set this up because I want you to think about that. I just dropped that on you. Like in my mind, I go PR disasters. Yeah, I mean that's my business, right? Like PR is my business. But what could I proactively look forward to and be able to stop from one of my clients because of an AI implementation? Like, where do we go with that? Is there any things you could think of?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in that same panel, and I don't want to give you to get ahead of you, but like, I think it was Milan Panseri from Observe AI, made the statement like, when you start, think about making your humans better, as opposed to replacing them, because, while the AI and a good informed model might suggest next steps and things like that, you've also got a human in the middle to basically stop it from getting crazy. Like if you just think back to that whole Air Canada thing back in the day, we'll find a link to the story and put it in the show notes if you're not aware of it, but it was a scenario where they had just turned customer service over to a bot, and it was a satisfaction issue, and it just made the decision to make up a promotion for the end user. Right. And it became a thing. And, I won't get into all the detail on it. I'll allow you to read that on your own. But it's those kinds of things where, I think we're going to get there, but kind of human assisted in customer service scenarios is a nice middle ground there, where you're using the AI to make the agent faster, better, smarter, offer additional opportunities and thoughts, but not necessarily turning the keys over to something that's still learning.
Got it.
In a lot of ways, think about like AI as a really smart child.
Yep. With
an insane amount of ability to grab data, but it doesn't have empathy, right? It doesn't have, it's not going to look at the conclusion it's coming to and go, maybe I reached there. It's just going to draw lines together, make connections between data, and present them.
Love it. So, not really along those lines, but continuing the same conversation here, right? With AI becoming more important and more talked about, right? How do you think regulatory frameworks evolved at all in 2024?
Not really.
No.
I think the need for them is becoming a screaming mess. But I think the challenge here is that, individual governments are moving at their own pace. The EU is doing a thing, but if we're being honest, is China ever going to care? No.
Yeah, right.
Right. So Do they outpace innovation because they're not regulated? Do they, so that's the biggest concern you have from a regulatory perspective is, are we going to do this universally, right? Look, we're tied up right now in the middle of this. Is TikTok going to get banned, right?
I just wrote that down.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of our challenges is that, regulatory is going to be on a nation state or an organized, group of nation states like, the EU. And they're going to be happening at different levels.
Right.
That's one. Second one is, there's going to be regulatory around use and there's going to be regulatory around source. And that one's even harder. And what I mean around source, like what does copyright mean?
Yeah.
Every answer that's delivered from a large language model that's pointed towards the internet has every song, every set of lyrics, every chord chart, every movie script, every book as its source material. It's all derivative, right? So most models are not copying word for word, but you're like, okay, well, let's put these lyrics together and here's some lyrics for your new song. Well, I don't know, is that a copyright issue?
Yep.
At the end of the day?
Yeah.
And then if you think about it, right, like how many songs over the course of history went back and said similar things? Like we've created language out of rock and roll. Were those copyright, issues?
Well, you see this lawsuits going on about the sampling all the time, right?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Sounds like.
But even pre-sampling, a lot of the defenses in sampling cases have been like every piece of music is a derivative work.
Right.
So where do you draw the line at the end of the day? So it's really those two things, right? Regulatory around use, country by country. Yeah, some countries have pushed it forward. The EU's pushed some things forward, but when the rest of the world isn't where they are, it's going to be hard. The second one is going to be, I don't know what we're going to do around copyright at the end of the day. And then we do something here in the U.S., but nobody cares in China.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to get really interesting.
It's going to get and when you put it like that too, I even think about like when I forget what it was. I think they were talking to Elon Musk about when he purchased Twitter, and they were like, "Why can't you just regulate the way things come out of Twitter all the time?" And he was like, "The rules and laws in Saudi Arabia are different than the United States, so we have to have somebody that understands the laws in every single area we have Twitter in order to make the right decision."
Yeah.
So that's going to be, I would imagine that's going to be a challenge when it comes to the governance of AI as well down the road.
It completely is.
That's great. That's going to be crazy. You're right. And do you want in on that? You want to sit on the board if they need help doing that? What do you think?
Sure, I'm signing up right now.
I'm putting his name on it. Let's go.
Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepointe Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepointe, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointetechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepointe, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.